I was standing in a ballroom filled with 200 people when my own sister picked up the microphone, looked straight at me, and said, "My sister is unwanted. No one wants her." And then my mother laughed. Not just laughed. She leaned forward and added, "She's a used product." The room exploded. Laughter. Glasses clanking. People turning to stare at me like I was the entertainment. But I wasn't alone. My 5-year-old son was sitting right next to me, his tiny hand gripping mine, his eyes wide, confused. "Mommy, why are they laughing at you?" I couldn't answer, because in that moment, something inside me broke. But here's what no one in that room expected. There was one person who didn't laugh, and what he did next didn't just stop the wedding. It destroyed everything my family had built for years. If you've ever been in a room where people were supposed to love you, but instead made you feel invisible, go ahead and subscribe now so you don't miss what happens next. Because the truth behind that wedding is even worse than what you just heard. And I promise you, by the time this story ends, you're going to ask yourself one question: how far can a family go before love turns into cruelty? To understand how I ended up standing in that ballroom, being laughed at by my own family, you need to know what it was like growing up in the Ingram household. Because this didn't start at the wedding. It started long before that, in a house where love was never given equally. I grew up in a large colonial home in Greenwich, Connecticut. 4 bedrooms, white shutters, a perfectly manicured lawn that my father took pride in every Sunday morning. From the outside, we looked like the kind of family people admired. But inside that house, there were 2 types of daughters. There was the princess, and there was the one who didn't matter. My younger sister Vivian was the princess. She had my mother's blonde hair, her easy smile, and this natural charm that made people forgive anything. Teachers overlooked her mistakes. Boys followed her around like she was the only girl in the room, and my parents adored her in a way that was impossible to miss. She was special. That's the word my mother always used. Vivian is special. Vivian is going places. Vivian deserves the best. And then there was me. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who didn't cause trouble. At least, that's how they described it. But what it really meant was, I was the one who didn't need anything, or at least, that's what they told themselves. I learned very early on not to ask for too much, because asking meant being compared, and comparisons never went in my favor. When I was 16, I went to prom wearing a dress I bought myself, $63, clearance rack at Macy's. I remember standing in front of the mirror, smoothing out the fabric, trying to convince myself it was enough. 2 years later, when it was Vivian's turn, my mother spent $500 on her gown, hand-beaded, soft blush pink, the kind of dress that made people stop and stare when she walked into a room. I remember watching her come down the stairs that night, my mother adjusting the straps, my father smiling like he had won something, and I remember thinking, what did she do right that I did wrong? Our bedrooms told the same story. Vivian had the corner room, with a balcony that overlooked the garden, white furniture, soft lighting. Everything looked like it came out of a magazine. My room was at the end of the hallway, right next to the utility closet, filled with old furniture that used to belong to our grandmother. Nothing matched. Nothing felt like it belonged to me. But I never complained, because complaining didn't change anything. It just made my mother sigh and remind me that I should be grateful. And the truth is, I didn't hate Vivian. I couldn't. She was just a kid, growing up in a system she didn't create. If anything, I felt sorry for myself. Not in a dramatic way, just in those quiet moments, late at night, when the house was still, and I would lie there wondering, what is it about me that makes my own parents look past me? I tried to be better. I studied harder. I helped around the house. I stayed out of trouble. I became everything a good daughter was supposed to be. And still, it was never enough to be seen. Over time, you start to adjust to that kind of invisibility. You stop expecting attention. You stop expecting fairness. You learn how to take up less space, so no one has to notice you at all. And eventually, it becomes normal. That's the dangerous part, because when something feels normal, you stop questioning it. You accept it. You build your life around it. And I did. I built my entire identity around being the one who didn't need anything, the one who could handle it, the one who stayed quiet, no matter what. I didn't know it then, but that version of me, the quiet one, the invisible one, was exactly the person my family needed me to be. Because as long as I stayed in that role, no one ever had to answer the question, why was I treated so differently? And by the time I realized the truth, it was already too late, because everything I had learned in that house was about to follow me into the rest of my life. And eventually, it would lead me straight to that wedding. I met Kevin when I was 24, during my second year working as an ER nurse. He was confident, charming in that effortless way, The kind of man who made you feel seen without you even asking for it. And for someone like me, someone who had spent her whole life feeling invisible, that kind of attention felt like everything. He listened. He complimented me. He made me believe for the first time that I mattered. We got married a year later. My parents were there, of course, smiling for photos, greeting guests. But even at my own wedding, the attention somehow shifted back to Vivian. My mother spent most of the night telling people about Vivian's internship in Manhattan. Both my girls are doing well, she would say, and then pause. But Vivian, she's something special. I remember standing there in my wedding dress, hearing that, and feeling something sink quietly inside me. But I ignored it, because I had Kevin, and I thought, that was enough. It wasn't. The marriage started to change slowly, not all at once, not in a way that made it easy to leave. It was subtle, little comments at first. You should try harder with your appearance. Why are you always so emotional? You're lucky I'm patient with you. At the time, I didn't see it for what it was. I thought maybe he was right. Maybe I needed to be better. That's what I had been taught, after all. If something feels wrong, it must be you. So I tried. I tried to be quieter, kinder, easier to love. But the harder I tried, the smaller I became. By the time I found out he was having an affair, I was 7 months pregnant. I remember sitting on the edge of our bed, holding his phone, reading messages I wish I had never seen. And all I could think was, of course this is happening to me. The divorce was finalized when my son Ethan was just over a year old. I was 27, a single mother, working night shifts at the hospital, while my baby slept in a daycare that charged by the hour. It was exhausting, not just physically, but in a way that makes you question everything about yourself. And when I told my mother, she didn't ask if I was okay. She sighed, a long disappointed sigh, like I had confirmed something she had always believed. I always worried you didn't know how to keep a man happy, she said. Vivian would never let this happen to her. My father said nothing. He never did. Vivian sent me a text. That sucks. But honestly, you always pick the wrong guys. Maybe try therapy. That was it. No offer to help, no checking in, no asking how I was managing with a newborn on my own. Just judgment. I told myself I didn't need them, that I was strong, that I could handle it. And maybe, in some ways, I did. Because every night, after a 12-hour shift, I would come home to our small apartment, heat up something quick, and sit quietly beside Ethan's crib, watching him sleep. And in those moments, something inside me would settle. Because even if I wasn't enough for them, I was enough for him. And that had to be enough for me. Daniel came into the picture about 2 years later. Vivian had met him at some charity event. He was a children's rights attorney. Quiet, observant. Not the kind of man who tried to dominate a room, but the kind who noticed everything happening inside it. The first time I met him was at a family dinner, and I remember it clearly, because it was the first time in a long time someone really looked at me. Not past me, not through me, at me. He shook my hand, then immediately crouched down to Ethan's level. Hey, buddy, I like your dinosaur shirt. Is that a T-Rex? Ethan lit up, and I realized something in that moment. No one in my family had ever spoken to him like that. Not once. Throughout dinner, I caught Daniel watching the way my mother redirected every conversation back to Vivian. Watching the way my father laughed at things Vivian said, but barely responded when I spoke. Watching the way I automatically got up, cleared plates, while Vivian stayed seated, scrolling through her phone. Later that night, as I was loading Ethan into the car, Daniel stepped outside. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there for a second, like he was choosing his words carefully. Then he asked, "Does your family always treat you like that?" I blinked, caught off guard, like what I asked. He didn't hesitate, like you're invisible. I let out a small laugh, the kind you use when you don't want to admit the truth. That's just how we are, I said. Vivian's the star. I'm just in the background. He didn't laugh. He just nodded slowly, like he understood more than I was saying. Then he looked at Ethan and back at me. You're a good mother, he said quietly. He's lucky to have you. And then he walked back inside. I stood there for a long moment after he left, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Seen. Not completely, not fully understood, but enough to matter. I didn't realize it then. But Daniel had been watching everything. Every interaction, every imbalance, every moment I tried to make myself smaller. And I definitely didn't realize that one day he wouldn't stay quiet about it. Because when the wedding came, he was going to see everything. One last time. And this time, he wasn't going to let it slide. The wedding invitation arrived in a thick cream envelope, the kind that feels expensive before you even open it. Gold lettering, heavy paper, everything about it, designed to impress. Vivian Marie Ingram and Daniel James Mercer request the pleasure of your company. I stared at it for a long moment, my fingers resting on the edge of the card, trying to decide how I felt, because by then, I had learned something about my family. Important events were never just events. They were performances, and everyone had a role to play. 2 weeks before the wedding, Vivian called me. Her tone was light, almost casual, but there was something underneath it, something controlled. "Morgan, I just want to go over a few details," she said. "Of course," I replied. There was a pause. "First, can you wear something understated pastels, neutrals? Nothing too noticeable. I don't want anything distracting from me." I glanced at the deep green dress I had bought months earlier. Something simple but elegant. Something that made me feel just a little confident. "Okay," I said. "I can do that." "Good," she replied quickly. Then came the second request. "And about Ethan." My chest tightened. "He's 5, Morgan. You know how kids are. They get restless, loud, unpredictable. I really don't want anything interrupting the ceremony." I already knew where this was going. "I don't have anyone to watch him," I said quietly. There was another pause, a longer one this time. "Fine," she said, "but you'll be seated in the back, near the exit, just in case." Just in case. Like my son was a problem waiting to happen. I swallowed and agreed, because saying no had never really been an option. The morning of the wedding, my mother called. Her voice was brisk, efficient. I spoke with the event coordinator. She said, "You and Ethan are at table 23, near the service entrance." I closed my eyes for a second. "Okay. And Morgan?" She added, her tone sharpening slightly. "Don't make a scene. This is Vivian's day. We can't have distractions." Distractions. That's what we were. I should have seen it then. The positioning, the tone, the way everything was being arranged so precisely. But I didn't. I told myself it was normal, that weddings were stressful, that people said things they didn't mean. I told myself a lot of things that morning, just to get through it. The ballroom was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hanging from high ceilings, white roses everywhere, soft music drifting through the air. It looked like something out of a magazine. Ethan squeezed my hand as we walked in. "Mommy, it's so pretty," he whispered. "It is," I said, smiling down at him. "Come on, let's find our table." Table 23 was exactly where my mother said it would be, tucked into the far corner, half hidden behind a pillar, so close to the kitchen doors, I could hear the staff shouting orders. The people at our table were distant relatives, faces I barely recognized. No one from my immediate family came over. Not my parents, not Vivian. I watched from a distance as they moved through the room, greeting guests, laughing, receiving compliments. My mother looked radiant. My father stood beside her like everything was exactly as it should be. And Vivian, she entered like she was stepping onto a stage. Perfect dress, perfect smile. Every eye in the room drawn to her. She spotted me across the ballroom, and she smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile that said, "I see you, and I still choose not to include you." On her way to the head table, she stopped briefly at ours. "Morgan," she said lightly, "you made it." "Of course," I replied. "You're my sister." Her eyes flicked to Ethan, then back to me. "Just remember what we talked about," she said. Then she turned and walked away, like the conversation had already ended. Something about that moment stayed with me, a feeling I couldn't quite name. Not anger, not sadness, just unease, as if something had already been decided, and I was the only one who didn't know what it was. During cocktail hour, the photographer gathered the family for pictures. I stood up instinctively, smoothing my dress, ready to join, but my mother appeared beside me. "Just immediate family for this set," she said quickly. I blinked. "I am immediate family." "We're doing a smaller grouping first," she replied. "You understand?" I did. I always did. I sat back down slowly. Ethan tugged at my sleeve. "Mommy, why aren't we in the picture?" I forced a smile. "We'll take our own later, okay?" He nodded, trusting me. And that trust felt heavier than anything else in that room. As the evening moved on, I noticed small things. Details that didn't seem important at first, but started to add up. The way certain people looked at me, then quickly looked away. The way my mother checked her phone, then glanced in my direction. And at one point, I saw a message flash across her screen. Just a few words. "Remember the plan." My stomach tightened. I told myself it meant nothing, that I was overthinking, that I always overthought things. But deep down, something didn't feel right. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just a guest at this wedding. I was part of something else, something I hadn't agreed to, something I didn't understand yet. And then, the music stopped. Glasses clinked. The room quieted. And Vivian stood up, reaching for the microphone. And in that moment, I realized whatever was about to happen wasn't going to be small. It was going to change everything. The room quieted almost instantly. As Vivian stepped onto the stage, the lights seemed to follow her, soft and flattering, like everything else in her life. She took the microphone with ease, smiling out at the crowd like she had done this 100 times before. "Thank you all for being here," she began. Her voice was warm, polished. "This is the happiest day of my life." Applause rippled through the room. She turned toward my parents, thanking them for their love, their support, their belief in her. My mother dabbed at her eyes. My father nodded proudly. And then, something shifted. Subtle, but unmistakable. Vivian's tone changed. Her smile sharpened, just slightly. "And I want to talk about family," she continued. "About the lessons we learn from the people closest to us." Her eyes moved slowly across the room. And then, they landed on me. I felt it instantly. That same feeling from earlier, but stronger now. Colder, especially my sister. Ethan straightened beside me. "Mommy, she's talking about you," he whispered. "I know, baby," I said softly. "It's okay." But it wasn't. Morgan Vivian called out, her voice amplified across the ballroom. "Could you stand up?" Every head turned. 200 people, all at once. I didn't want to move, but I did, because I always did. I stood slowly, my hand tightening around Ethan's. "There she is," Vivian said, smiling brightly. My big sister. A few people clapped politely. My sister taught me so many important lessons growing up. Her voice carried easily, controlled, measured. She got married young, had a baby. She tilted her head, just slightly. And then, things didn't work out. A few scattered laughs, uncomfortable, but present. I felt the heat rise in my face. "My sister is a single mother," she continued. "And now, she's alone." More laughter this time. Louder. I felt Ethan shift beside me, his hand tightening. "My sister is unwanted." The word hung in the air. Heavy. Sharp. "No man wants her," Vivian added lightly. "I mean, can you blame them?" The laughter grew. Stronger now. Confident. Like permission had been given. "She comes with baggage," she continued. "A kid. Bills. All of it." Someone near the front actually clapped. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. It felt like the entire room had closed in around me, and I was standing in the center of it, with nowhere to go. And then, my mother's voice cut through the noise. "She's a used product." Clear, loud, deliberate. The room erupted. Laughter exploded across the ballroom. Glasses clinking. People leaning toward each other. Whispers, smirks. I saw my father cover his mouth, trying to hide his smile. But he wasn't hiding it. Not really. I looked down at Ethan. His face was pale, his eyes wide and wet. "Mommy?" he whispered. "Why are they laughing at you?" That question broke something inside me, because I didn't have an answer. Not one that made sense. Not one a 5-year-old could understand. On stage, Vivian raised her glass. "My sister taught me exactly what not to do with my life," she said. "So really, I should thank her." More laughter, more applause. To Morgan, she continued. My cautionary tale. Glasses lifted around the room. I could hear the sound of it. Crystal tapping against crystal, as people toasted my humiliation. And then, everything stopped. The laughter, the movement, the noise. It didn't fade. It cut off, like someone had pulled the plug. I looked up. Daniel was standing, his chair pushed back behind him. His expression, completely different from before. Gone was the polite smile. Gone was the quiet observer. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed. Not on Vivian, on Ethan, on my son. Still standing there, trembling. Daniel moved. Not quickly, not dramatically. Just with purpose. Step by step, across the marble floor. No one spoke. No one moved. 200 people, watching, waiting. Vivian turned toward him, confused. "Daniel," she said softly, "what are you doing?" He didn't answer. He reached the stage, and without raising his voice, without making a scene, he took the microphone from her hand. Just took it. Firm. Asani, firm. Calm. Like it was something that didn't belong to her anymore. "Daniel," she said again. This time, sharper. "Sit down. I'm not finished." He ignored her. Completely. And for the first time that night, Vivian looked unsure. Daniel lifted the microphone. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice steady. Clear. "But I need to say something." The room held its breath. "I've spent the last 2 years watching this family," he continued. "Watching how they treat Morgan. Silence. Real silence. Not uncomfortable. Not uncertain. Heavy. I've watched her be ignored," he said. Talked over. Dismissed. His voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. And tonight, I just watched 200 people laugh. He paused, his eyes moving across the room, while a 5-year-old boy watched his mother be humiliated. No one laughed now. No one even moved. "That child," he said, pointing gently toward Ethan, "is 5 years old, And you made him sit there and listen to you call his mother unwanted, damaged, a used product. The words landed harder this time, because now there was no laughter to soften them. I am a children's rights attorney, Daniel continued. I've dedicated my life to protecting kids from exactly this kind of harm. He turned, slowly, toward Vivian. And I will not be part of a family that creates it. Vivian shook her head. It was a joke, she said quickly. You're overreacting. Daniel let out a short breath. A joke, he repeated. You planned this. You rehearsed it. You turned your own sister's pain into entertainment. He stepped back from her. A clear distance now. A line drawn in front of everyone. I can't marry you, he said. The words hit like a shockwave. I won't. Gasps filled the room. Sharp, audible, real. Daniel glanced briefly toward a phone set up near the dance floor. This entire reception is being live-streamed, he added. People outside this room are watching this. Right now. And suddenly, this wasn't just a moment. It was evidence. He placed the microphone down gently. I'm sorry for the disruption, he said to the crowd. Please, enjoy your evening. And then, he walked off the stage, leaving behind silence, shock, and a wedding that no longer existed. For a moment, no one moved. The room felt suspended, like everything had been knocked off balance and hadn't landed yet. Then suddenly, voices, low at first, then rising, spreading across the ballroom like a ripple turning into a wave. What just happened? Did he really just... Is this part of the wedding? Confusion? Shock. But it didn't take long for that confusion to find a target. Morgan, my mother's voice cut through the noise. Sharp, furious. She was already walking toward me, her heels striking the floor with purpose. What did you do? She demanded. Her finger pointed straight at me. What did you say to Daniel? I blinked. I didn't. You ruined her wedding, she snapped, her voice rising, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. You've always been jealous of her, always. The words came fast now, like they had been waiting. You couldn't stand seeing her happy, so you poisoned him against her. My father appeared beside her, his face tight. What did you tell him? He asked. Behind our backs, I felt something shift inside me. Not panic, not fear, something else, something steady. I didn't tell him anything, I said quietly. I barely spoke to him. Liar, Vivian's voice broke in. I turned. She was standing now, her perfect image unraveling in real time. Mascara streaked, hands shaking. You've been trying to turn him against me since the beginning, she shouted. You couldn't let me have one thing, not one perfect day. Around us, people were watching, listening, and I could feel it happening. The shift. The same people who had laughed just minutes ago were now looking at me differently, not with sympathy, with suspicion. Maybe she did something. Maybe she caused this. Poor Vivian. The narrative, rewriting itself, right in front of me. And suddenly I understood something very clearly. If I stayed, if I argued, explained, defended myself, I would lose anyway, because this wasn't about truth. It never had been. It was about who they decided I was. And I had spent 32 years trying to change that. I looked down at Ethan. His face was red, his eyes still wet, his small hands clenched tightly against my dress. Mommy, he whispered, I want to go. That was it. That was the moment. Not the speech, not the laughter. This, my son, asking to leave a place that had just taught him his mother was something to laugh at. I took a slow breath. Then I stood. Not quickly, not dramatically. Just stood. I didn't say anything to Daniel, I said calmly. My voice steady, even. He saw everything himself. My mother scoffed. I'm not finished. The words came out firm, clear, and for the first time in my life, she stopped talking. I didn't need to poison him, I continued. You've been showing him exactly who you are for 2 years. Silence. Real silence again. Not the kind from shock. The kind from truth. Vivian shook her head. You're lying, she said. You've always been jealous of me. I didn't argue. Didn't defend myself. Because I finally understood. I didn't need them to believe me. I just needed to leave. I bent slightly, lifting Ethan into my arms. He wrapped his arms around my neck immediately, holding on like he was afraid to let go. We're going home, I whispered. He nodded against my shoulder. Behind me? My mother's voice rose again. Morgan, you come back here and apologize right now. I didn't turn around. I just walked, step by step, across that ballroom. 200 people watching. But this time, it felt different. Not like I was being judged, like I was leaving something behind. Something heavy, something I had carried for too long. Near the exit, Daniel was standing, waiting, not blocking the way. Just there. Morgan, he said softly. I'm sorry. I shook my head slightly. You don't need to apologize. I adjusted Ethan in my arms. You just did something no one else ever did. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a card, and handed it to me. "If you ever need anything," he said, "legal help, anything at all, call me." I took it. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Not just for that, for everything." Behind us, chaos was building, voices rising, chairs moving, the perfect wedding unraveling. But I didn't look back. I pushed open the doors, stepping out into the quiet hallway. The noise faded instantly, like it had never existed. Ethan lifted his head slightly. "Mommy," he said softly, "are you sad?" I thought about it, really thought about it, because for the first time, I didn't feel what I expected. "No," I said gently, "I'm not." And I wasn't. Not angry, not broken, just clear. "How about pancakes when we get home?" I asked. "With chocolate chips." His voice brightened instantly. "Yes." I smiled, pressing a soft kiss to his hair. "Then that's what we'll do." And as I walked down that long hallway, holding my son close, I realized something I had never allowed myself to believe before. Leaving wasn't losing. It was the first time I had ever chosen myself. And I had a feeling this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something else. Something my family would never be part of again. If you step back from this story, not as a bystander, but as someone who understands human behavior, what happened in that ballroom wasn't sudden. It was the result of a pattern, a family dynamic that had been built over years, where one child is lifted and another is quietly diminished. In psychology, there's a term for this: the golden child and the scapegoat. One is praised, protected, even when they're wrong. The other is blamed, overlooked, even when they're doing everything right. And over time, those roles don't just shape how a family behaves. They shape how a person sees themselves. Morgan didn't become invisible overnight. She was taught to be invisible, taught to stay quiet, to accept less, to believe that love had to be earned. But here's the truth. Love that requires you to shrink is not love. And family that humiliates you in public is not safety. What changed everything in that story wasn't just what Daniel said. It was what Morgan finally understood. That walking away isn't weakness. It's clarity. It's the moment you stop asking, "Why don't they love me?" and start saying, "I deserve better than this." If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or made to feel like you were never enough, take a moment, not just to listen, but to reflect. Because sometimes, the hardest decisions we make are the ones that finally set us free. And if you want more stories like this, stories that don't just entertain, but help you see things more clearly, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel. You never know which story might be the one that changes something inside you. Because in the end, it's not about what others call you. It's about what you choose to believe about yourself.